One of the things I wanted to do with these glass images was to use a number of them in a slideshow presentation. And because they've all been shot static from a tripod, then I know that each piece of glass can be kept in register and I can just change the colours on screen. But it does give me a problem when I come to produce the images. Now I've got these labelled in green because although the difference between the green and the red looks, well, they look much the same, I did move the glass from here. So we're going to concentrate on the ones on the left. But in a previous video I could, and I think we did demonstrate that we could select all of those red flagged images and manipulate them in one go. But for our purposes here I don't need quite that many, so I'm going to select all 7 of those. I probably only need 3 or 4 at the most, but there's only 7 there, so I'll select them and we'll hit the enter key to open them up into Camera Raw. With the top image selected over on the left hand side in the film strip, I'm going to hit Ctrl A to select them all. Now I've got a bit of a problem here when it comes to cropping, because if I'm going to make these images into slideshow images, I really need them to be 16:9 aspect ratio. But I think I've got a problem here with content because I've filled the frame too much with the glass. I don't think there's enough space around to be able to crop them, but we can check it out by selecting the crop tool from within RAW. I've already got it set to 16:9. If I click and drag from the bottom left corner, you can see that to get all of the glass in at the bottom, even if I come up a little bit, I'm a little bit too tight to the top of that glass. So I can't really crop them in RAW, which could give us a problem. If I don't crop them all together in Adobe Camera Raw, it means I've got to do much the same in Photoshop, which means I'd have to open up all 7 of those images, drag them into a layered stack, and then crop them so they all remain in register, and then save them as individual images. Well, that is what I think we can speed up considerably. So I'm going to back away from the crop here by just hitting the escape key. Of course, although the images are all identical in content, they've all had different backgrounds used. So sometimes if we were doing a batch manipulation of this group, some of the images may need a little bit of a different manipulation than others. But we can certainly predict, I think, the middle ground. So what I'd be doing here to start with is doing all of the spotting. You can see I've already started to do that on this image, and it's going to be applied to all of those. The next thing I'd want to do though is to go to my general settings, the basic tab, because in producing the glass images you soon get a feel for things. A little bit of a gap there in the white, so if I go to the white slider, move it to the right, we just put that little bit of extra sparkle into the image. I tend to like to lean on the blacks a little bit, give it a little bit of impact, maybe a touch of vibrance. But apart from that, there's not a great deal more. What I should have said, of course, is to tick the box to remove chromatic aberration. But what I'm going to do next is to click Done. Now the images don't open up into Photoshop because we didn't ask for them to be opened. We just wanted the settings we applied to be completed. If I go back to Bridge now, I've got all of those images with the settings that I want applied. But sometimes we may find the odd one. Let's take this one as an example. Maybe it's a bit light at the top left, so I may want to just adjust that separate to the rest because it's been affected by a lighter background. So I can open this one up into Camera Raw. I could apply a graduated filter as an example, maybe on the top. I could even do a little bit of work with the brush to darken that area down, and anything else I wanted to do on this image which was different from the others. And when I'm happy that I've got that one done, I can click done and move on to the next one. So now we've got a batch of 7 images. Let's highlight them all. Now we need to open these up into Photoshop, and this is where things could get tedious, because we would have to make a layered stack of all 7 of those, then crop them and then save them. But we can speed the process up. We can take all of these thumbnails, even though they're raw files, but we've got our settings within them. We can now open them up into a layered stack. Go to the Tools section of Bridge, choose Photoshop, and that's the option we want, Load Files into Photoshop Layers. Now this will take about 30 seconds depending on the speed of your computer. After all, we're opening up 7 images and bringing them all into layers. If you look at the tab at the top of the screen there, you can see I'm working with 16-bit images, so they're quite large. So I'm going to stop my recording at this point, and I'll come back when this part has completed. Once we're done, I'll just hit Ctrl-0 to fit the image on screen. And if I go to my layers and I'll pop the layers out on screen, you can see all 7 of those images in the layered stack. Now, the one thing I need to do before I go any further is, if I'm going to think next about cropping the images to my slideshow size, I probably want to reduce all these to 8-bit. Now I can do that all in one go while they're in RAW. So I'm going to go to Image, Mode, and change them to 8-bit. But remember we had that cropping issue. Well, it's not going to change here unless we distort the image a little bit. So selecting the top layer, holding the Shift key and selecting the bottom, we'll select all those in between. If I go to Edit, Free Transform, I can distort my image a little bit. Now we probably wouldn't want to do this if this was a people picture. I'm sure they wouldn't be too impressed being made shorter and slightly fatter. But with an image like this, it really isn't a problem. Now when I select my crop tool, and I've got the values at the top of the screen left from a previous work I was doing, so I can just click inside, move my crop into the position I want. I want a little bit of space just below that reflection of the broken glass down here, but now you can see I've got a respectable gap between the top of that glass, and compositionally it's reasonably good too. Even that horizontal line is very close to the edge of my black perspex. So I can just hit the tick on the options bar and all 7 will be cropped for me, and it's not entirely necessary, but Ctrl-0 is a nice keyboard shortcut to fit the images back on screen. So now we need to save all of these images, and when you think about it, that could be tedious too, couldn't it? Because in the past I would have possibly gone to this image, saved it as a JPEG into my slideshow folder with a compression ratio of 6, then this one, then this one, then this one, and so on. But what we can do is actually do all of that in one operation. We don't need to select them all, but we do need to export them. So let's go to File, Export, and what we're looking for is Layers to Files. The first thing Photoshop is asking us is, where would we like these images placed? What destination? Well, let's browse for one. I've created an empty folder on my desktop for these few demo pictures, just calling it glass, so I'll select that. We can give the images a prefix name if we wish, and we may as well keep that simple with glass. We can select the file type from a number of options, but here JPEG is perfect. But we also need to compress the quality a little bit, and 6 is also my slideshow standard. So all I've got to do is click Run, and within a few seconds Photoshop will do that task for me. And there we are, finished. Now, just to be sure that everything has worked as we would expect, if I go to my bottom bar here and open up Pictures to Exe, navigate to my desktop and my folder called Glass, there are all of the thumbnails waiting for me. All I need to do is to select them in the order I want to use them, and I'm ready to begin my slideshow.